You're listening to The Streaming Wars, the podcast that discusses all of the latest happenings regarding your favorite streaming services. Find out which service is winning the war this time around.
Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of The Streaming Wars. I'm Dustin, Tony is with me, and we are here to discuss everything from July 15th through the 21st. We have a bunch of news as usual, so let's get right into it. Starting off with Netflix. Netflix has set an animated series featuring Stan Sakai's Samurai Rabbit, which is also known as Usagi Yojimbo. Netflix has landed the international rights for A Suitable Boy from BBC. Jessica Watson biopic is in the works. Netflix has released a list of their most popular original films on the service, which is worth a look because it has some interesting things. Bird Box and Extraction are the top ones. The SpongeBob film will land internationally on Netflix. This is the SpongeBob film that we just talked about actually last episode that is going PVOD next month. It's actually going to land on Netflix in the international markets, presumably because here in the States, domestically, it's going to land on the new CBS All Access super service that they're creating at some point in the near future. There's an animated film called Bombay Rose that is headed to Netflix in 2020. Netflix has upped its Indian content output with 8 new films and series. Netflix has also committed its largest budget ever to the upcoming film The Gray Man, which will star Ryan Gosling and Chris Evans. This film is supposedly going to, when I say commit, there's a difference between commit and actually cost. So we've talked about The Irishman. Obviously, the last couple of weeks, we've actually talked about films in general and how much they've cost. The Irishman has come up a lot because The Irishman has been said to cost $300 million to make. That is by far the most expensive Netflix film project ever, but they never actually committed $300 million to the project. If anything, it ended up bloating itself to $300 million. But this film, however, The Gray Man is actually is committed $200 million, which means Netflix is saying, here's $200 million. You go make a movie for at least $200 million, hopefully as close to $200 million as possible. But the reality is, if they do go over, it's going to be understanding because they're committing at least $200 million. So special effects could be very, very high end. We could see, high profile actors board the film in addition to Ryan Gosling and Chris Evans for supporting roles and things like that. There's a lot of money here. Let's just put it that way. And this is a huge, huge project that makes Netflix not look like they're standing by and watching everybody else buy up these projects, because they're creating their own original content, their own original films.
From the fan, a film like this kind of makes me want to get Netflix again. This is definitely up my alley, and I'm very interested in this project. I like the Russo brothers. I like Chris Evans, I like Ryan Gosling, and I think that this would be perfect. Just a fun film. Personally, I would have a lot of fun with that. But in seriousness, this is a lot of money. We might be playing with semantics a little bit and kind of being a little ridiculous on the word choices, but I think it's important of committing up to $200 million. I mean, if it's just they need a few extra million to get over the hurdle or for something, then they might give them that. But they're aiming at a $200 million overall budget. Here you go, and that's a lot of money. But when you compare it to our buddies at Apple TV Plus and how much they've been spending on content, a couple 50 million projects. You have like the 80 million Greyhound, 80 million plus for Greyhound. You got Will Smith's new project that we talked about was like around 120 million. Let's be honest, probably a little bit more than that. And they've just been on a content spree left and right. And so, seeing Netflix kind of get in the game of big blockbusters, we know that they have in the past with the movie like Bright, The Irishman just took up a lot of money as well. This one, it's interesting to see that contrast between, Netflix and how they are in-house creating this content for a large budget films. And then you compare it to like Apple TV Plus, which has got similar budgets for their stuff, and just trying to see the correlations there. I personally I'm very skeptical of Apple TV Plus spending that much money, because it seems like they're spinning their way out of a situation. And usually that's not necessarily good to be in a hole and you're trying to spin your way out of that. Whereas in Netflix, they are the leader, the market leader in domestic in the United States and internationally. So it makes sense that they're kind of shoveling this kind of in the vein of R&D and trying to get an investment, a big investment from that. If we compare if we link this news piece of The Gray Man with Netflix's release of the most popular original films on the service, those two things together, and seeing the huge draw, even though that their numbers are a little bit weird of how they consider people who have watched something. They do that new metric now of just 2 minutes instead of watching 70% of the piece of content. Even still, they have a huge reach in their movies of their most original, of the most popular original films, is a lot of accounts. Even 2 minutes, like, as much as I like to make fun of that metric, it's still, they got people to click on this title and to be interested, at least for 2 minutes of that content. I can't say that Apple TV Plus has even similar numbers at all. Just in terms of just usage rate. Obviously they have less amount of subscribers, but the usage rate of their products is significantly less than Netflix's. So just kind of comparing those two things, those two articles of Netflix's most popular original content and this article, I'm curious to see for the future Netflix's strategy in investing in blockbuster type movies. And doesn't necessarily have to always be big budget. I think that there's a misconception that the bigger the budget, the bigger and the better the film is. I mean, unless you're Michael Bay, that's not necessarily the case. But I'm curious what that relationship is. And that relationship is for Netflix. Each studio has their own policy, and curious what Netflix is going to be in the future. I think that we're kind of seeing them try to figure out their own policy as well. They've experimented, they've dabbled, they have some big hits, they have some okay ones, just critically receptive and stuff like that. So we're just watching them deliver their policy on high budget films, and I'm just taking a macro look of the market and of the streaming players. I'm curious what Netflix's choices are and how they're going to affect the rest of the players in the space. To sum up, that is a lot of money, but I'm excited.
And it makes perfect sense, because that, I think, is exactly what their goal is to get people to come back that may have left for some of the other services, and to also just obviously get newer people, new subscribers in general too, with a lot of these high profile content. They're going to market the crap out of these, just like they've marketed a lot of those films that are on the most popular list that they released. A lot of those films were marketed really well, or in some ways, like Bird Box. I don't know that one was marketed a lot. I just remember it blew up social media. Yeah. It blew up insanely.
They got a bunch of free press off that movie too.
Yeah,
because social media just went. The Bird Box. Okay, let's take a time out for a second. The Bird Box challenge, like that was crazy how that blew up, and people walking around blindfolded in streets. So Netflix threw a lot of marketing dollars at Extraction, and I know that was just promoted everywhere. Their movie with Ben Affleck too had a lot of promotional dollars as well, so they're definitely going to promote the crap out of this. And Chris Evans of Captain America, of Marvel, the Russo brothers of Endgame, like they're going to promote the crap out of that. Overall, it's a win-win-win scenario for every player involved.
And we're going to talk about the Netflix quarter 2 results in a minute, but right before the quarter 2 results were actually revealed and they had their investor call, they actually announced that Ted Sarandos, who has been the content chief for Netflix for quite some time, he was actually promoted to co-CEO along with Reed Hastings, and they're going to be managing the company together, which makes perfect sense. Content goes hand in hand with the company. If the content's not successful at Netflix, then the Netflix fails. It's not like other companies. Walt Disney has other things that can prop them up if Disney Plus isn't doing so well. They have theme parks and merchandise that can help them, weather the storm of having some bad projects. You have, HBO Max, and obviously these are newer players to the streaming world, but you have HBO Max, which is obviously owned by Warner Media, which is part of AT&T. AT&T can weather the storm of some bad projects that HBO Max or within Warner Media, because they have a larger group. Same thing with Peacock, with Comcast, and same thing with Apple. Even though Apple TV Plus is obviously spending an insane amount of money, Apple can obviously float that money despite the fact that they don't have anywhere near the number of subscribers that would actually warrant some of these purchases that they've been doing. Netflix, however, is very reliant on the fact that they have to have good content in order to be successful. And to be successful, the content has to continue to bring in subscribers. So content and the business side of Netflix goes hand in hand, no questions. So it makes perfect sense that there would be co-CEOs, even if it's an uncommon thing that we are seeing in the business world right now.
I'm happy for Ted Sarandos. I think that this was a long time coming. This is from people that I've heard at Netflix, how Netflix is operated. It really was Sarandos and Hastings as co-CEOs, effectively co-CEOs. Even although Sarandos was the CCO for the longest time, he had that same leadership position. People at the company felt that he had an equal say in the direction of the company, and it makes sense given where the company was. I mean, Hastings is the most distributed with Netflix. He started the company. I mean, I could pretty much safely say that Netflix wouldn't be Netflix is today without Sarandos and his push for original content. And that really pushed the boundary, and it solidified that streaming could be and is a thing, is that you can deliver great TV, great content via the internet. It doesn't have to be through cable. And so I really think without his push for original content, Netflix wouldn't be where it is, the market leader, household synonym. What we think of Netflix as today is the big player. So without him, I think things would be totally different. So this is a well-earned promotion. With all the other players in the market right now and all the competition that Netflix has, that they have steady leadership as they move forward. So I'm happy for Netflix, and this is fantastic.
All right, so jumping over to Prime Video, Amazon, surprise, surprise, has launched a live television tier in Germany. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, wait, isn't this something that just got brought up recently? Yes, it's only been something that we've been talking about for multiple months, but more specifically, we've mentioned it in the last couple of weeks as well, specifically the business positions that they were currently hiring for, specifically looking for someone within live linear television. And it makes sense that this is happening. So to give you just an idea, because obviously it seems like a pilot program currently in Germany, but there is a live tier that is available through Prime for Prime customers in Germany that allows them to watch 38 different channels from public broadcasters, and out of those, 28 are in HD channels. That is great, because that also means that if you put that into perspective, it is entirely possible that Netflix is in fact working on something very soon here that could launch in other markets. This is something that could have been maybe a little bit easier and a good way to test it, but this is something that I'm telling everybody is going to happen sooner rather than later. Amazon will be getting into the live TV industry when it comes to the US, and they're going to put all these other players that have been raising their prices on notice.
We've been talking about it for a little bit, and I'm a little bit happy that we guessed correctly, or we deduced correctly, I guess. But I'm happy about it. But at the same time, it is still a shock that they are full blown going to live television. We've been seeing like the business positions like we just talked about. They've been delving more into live sports in the last 2 to 3 years, just really diving more into that. And so we knew, on the fringe that something like this was going to happen, but to get 38 channels just broadcast in Germany, I think this is a great test market. A great way to figure out how it works with the Prime platform, to see if, because once again, the way how Amazon does their streaming and Prime Video in general is a little bit different from other streaming partners, is that the players is that streaming is not the core of their business, or a central tenet of the business. For Disney, it's not part of the flywheel per se, but it's not the main business for these other players. But for Amazon, Prime Video is to push Prime Video subscriptions and to get more people to use Amazon in general. So I'm curious how the data, which we probably won't see any of the data, but we'll see the choices and responses of the data that Amazon gets, of if having live television as a Prime Video option boosts Amazon Prime subscriptions. And that's the case, then we could definitely see them reaching out to more and more different markets. But if we see that, okay, it's a pilot in Germany, a pilot program in Germany, it doesn't really move anywhere, obviously, that can probably be a good indicator that live television, although I think it's going to be good, although live television is a nice feature to have as a part of your Prime subscription, it's not driving Prime subscription sales. If that's the case, then Amazon's probably not going to launch this any further in other test markets, at least for the next few years, until they get more data and more of a handle on how to market that. That's kind of what this is it's a proof of concept that it can drive Prime subscriptions, Prime Video Amazon Prime subscriptions, and get more people to use Amazon. So it's all that funnel for Amazon to get people to use Amazon. So, but wow, that's big.
All right, so nothing for Hulu and nothing for CBS All Access. Apple TV Plus, there's a Justin Timberlake starring film called Palmer that has landed at Apple TV Plus. Apple has also ordered the series When Heroes Fly straight to series, and that is coming from the writer behind The Hurt Locker. Mark Bowl. Disney Plus, Nat Geo's Weird But True has moved over to Disney Plus for a third season. Now, quite honestly, this isn't that big of a surprise because I believe the second season was planned on launching on Disney Plus, but then for whatever reason it didn't, and now the third season's coming to Disney Plus. I'm sure that you can still watch, obviously, the first two seasons as well, but I believe the second season was supposed to debut on Disney Plus actually towards the beginning of their launch. Finally, with Disney Plus, second planned Disney Plus original series has moved over to YouTube. You may remember I brought this up specifically on a past episode. There was a series called Star Wars Jedi Temple Challenge, which was very in line with Legends of the Hidden Temple from Nickelodeon back in the day. This was a Star Wars version of that very challenge series. That series was originally announced for Disney Plus back in December. We talked about it here on this show. And then come May, a trailer release that I just happened to stumble across that actually said it was coming to Disney's YouTube channel, or I think it was the Star Wars Kids YouTube channel, not Disney Plus, which was odd because it was originally announced for Disney Plus. This is a new series. This one's called Marvel Storyboards, and basically it's a new nonfiction series that takes a lot of the Marvel storytellers, whether they be writers, artists, actors, and they talk about their stories and how they've been involved with Marvel. This is a 12-episode series that actually is going to debut on YouTube rather than Disney Plus. Now, the thing that, of course, that comes to the immediate attention is, why are there series that are being announced for Disney Plus heading to YouTube instead of Disney Plus? And my only explanation behind that is that, well, there's some reason why Disney does not want them on Disney Plus. I don't think it's necessarily because the content doesn't fit Disney Plus, but Disney themselves could be looking at the content saying, okay, this production isn't up to the quality that we would want it to be in order to promote it for Disney Plus, or they're looking at it from a different perspective and saying like, well, the content doesn't fit with what we've got right now. I don't see how that's the case because, as we know, when Disney Plus first launched, there was a number of odd choiced game shows that they had filling up their block of original content, and Star Wars Jedi Temple Challenge seems, at least by the trailer that I saw, I've never actually seen an episode, but the trailer that I saw looked a lot better than some of the trailers that I've seen for some of the other Disney game shows. So there's that. But then the other part of course, is that the trailer for this Marvel Storyboards actually looks in the same vein as that other Marvel series that was a nonfiction series that launched at the time that Disney Plus launched as well. I'm not sure why. Maybe they heard complaints from people saying that they weren't sure exactly why this type of content was ending up, or the content wasn't very popular, and they want to make sure that they aren't promoting shows on Disney Plus that aren't popular long term. But it does beg the question as to why they keep announcing content that ends up going to YouTube as an exclusive instead of Disney Plus, when we know they're not necessarily flush with content right now, and they could obviously use more content in general. So it's an odd choice, more specifically odd timing with the choice.
I don't know. Maybe they just want that YouTube ad money. That might be it.
If that's the case, then the YouTube ad money must be way better than the amount of people who are watching on Disney Plus. That's for sure.
But that might be it. Yeah. Overall, this is kind of like this is a bit of a head scratcher. So maybe we will get some type of answer. Maybe in Disney's quarterly reports, maybe they will detail why they offloaded some of these projects to YouTube. But yeah, I like your explanation. It's the one that makes the most sense.
All right, jumping over to Quibi, Trevor Noah is going to go head-to-head with some esports players in a new series that's coming to Quibi. There's also a comedy series called 137 Things My Wife Hates About Me that is also in development at Quibi. Jumping over to HBO Max, Michael Shea has got a sketch show that has been ordered by HBO Max. There's a limited series called Brujo that is currently in development. HBO Max will debut the documentary film On the Trail inside the 2020 primaries from CNN Films. And finally, there is a series called A World of Calm, which is based on the app Calm, that is also coming to HBO Max.
This is a little bit interesting. So the Calm app is an app to help you relax, to help you meditate, to help you clear your head if you're stressed. And so this is a very interesting project. Basically, they're going to get people to narrate different stories and basically narrate certain stories for you. It just seems like a very unique piece of content for a very unique audience. It's definitely one of those that's not going to reach, I feel like, a bunch of people, but I feel like it's going to reach a certain group of people. At first I was like, well, why do we need this content? What benefit does it have for HBO Max to develop content just for such niche audience group? I was thinking about that for a few moments, but when I think about it, it does make sense. There are people that are very much into meditation, into clearing your head, into having, a good mental headspace. And I feel like it's more HBO Max. They're taking a little bit more creative freedoms. It's not just driven by market forces or driven by analytics or driven by insiders that have been in there for forever. It seems like there's a little bit more liberty into some of the projects. And I could definitely see that this project is going to reach a certain group that the other players aren't really reaching. Because right now we're in the space of everyone's getting content. So everyone's getting, all these players are getting exposure to all these different markets, but now it's what differentiates you from the other players. And I think HBO Max is going to be, it's very unique catalog. An analog I see to this is maybe the Today content from Peacock that we talked about last week in the Today talk shows. And for various different things, that's not going to reach a whole bunch of subscribers. It's not going to reach a large amount of people, but for the people that it can reach, it's going to get them hooked. It's very into reaching, one of those subset of people. And I think that's a smart move by Peacock. I could see other streaming services doing something like this, a program that's like yoga or just like plant life or just, something else, just very niche audiences. And I could see streaming services doing more and more like that. You have a lot of YouTube series out there that kind of deal with certain things. And I think that we're going to also see streaming services adopt the same type of idea. And instead of making content that's making all content that's just to reach the most amount of people, I think we're going to see a new wave of content that's just going to reach a smaller subset of people. So you're going to have like the big group over here. This content's going to reach, pretty much as many people as possible. Then there's going to be this other content that's more creative, that's more independent, that reaches and it's targeted just to this more specific group of people. I think that we're going to start to see the new direction in streaming sometime soon. I think we're seeing a little bit of that here and there with different players with this Calm app. I think we saw it a little bit with the Today programming, and I want to see that more in the future. So that's kind of my view on the Calm series. And maybe I'm looking at it a little bit too much. Maybe I'm putting a little bit too much thought into it, but that's kind of how I see this going down. It might just be the only way that I can rationalize why they would make a TV series about the Calm, meditation app.
All right, so then jumping over to Peacock, there's the Canadian drama series Departure, which will head to Peacock. Peacock is also developing a series based on the video game Indivisible. And then if you're wondering why Peacock didn't end up on Roku or Amazon, it's because of data and ads, according to The Verge, which is something that we've actually talked about. We've talked about this before, too. Specifically, this has come up a couple different times. It feels like, obviously, there are some places that are talking about it more presently because Peacock just launched last week, which I'll talk about in a minute. But the idea here is that if there's any doubt in your mind as to why it's not happening, it's because of data and ads. There is also a potential third reason, and that is content for the ad-supported channels within the services. So Amazon has IMDb TV, and Roku has the Roku channel. They have content that is available for free, supported by ads. And there's an ad split that that obviously is between the content producer and the content provider, which would be obviously Roku or Amazon. IMDb TV. Now, the reason I bring this up is because this is not brought up in this conversation very often, but one would connect the dots and say that potentially the reason why Disney Plus didn't have an issue with getting on Amazon or Roku is because they cut a deal with some of the content that is not fitting to be on Disney Plus, meaning some of the content that you would expect to find on Hulu. If you remember correctly, I believe it was back in February, we actually talked about how the series Lost, which originally aired on ABC, is in fact owned by Disney, was going to IMDb TV. And at the time, it was a big get. It was like, wow, surprise, surprise. This is a huge thing for IMDb TV. And nobody really was wondering why it was going there, considering Disney owns the majority of Hulu and will completely own Hulu very shortly here. It makes perfect sense for that type of content to be over on Hulu because they own it. But that's not something that was happening. And you have to beg the question of as to why that is happening. So there's been some little scuttle out there about the fact that potentially one of the other points of contention when it comes to this is the fact that there's a problem with getting content. There's the, HBO Max, or more specifically Warner Media, and when you look at Peacock, more specifically NBC Universal, they don't have content that they specifically want to license out to Amazon for IMDb TV, or license content to Roku for the Roku channel, specifically for the purpose of them having content. They want their content themselves, or they want to make a better deal somewhere else that they can get for some of this content. So it's something that's not brought up a lot, but I honestly think that might have something to do with it too. NBC Universal already is licensing content from elsewhere to help fill their service. So it's not like they have a lot of options of giving away content, especially content that is popular enough to warrant this type of deal. But I honestly believe that this is another reason as to why this continues to happen. Is it's not just about the data and the ads, which is of course the most important thing, but I also think it has something to do with this other content that we hear about months after the fact.
I agree with you, and in hearing how those dots could be put together into the story that you're talking about actually makes a lot of sense. And it answers questions I didn't even know I had about how Disney got that deal done. I always attributed it to that they never were planning to do ad supported, so they didn't have to worry about that type of language in the contract and try to negotiate that. So that's a really fun conspiracy, and it's very plausible. So that's really good, interesting to think about. But to take off the analyst hat for a second and put on the consumer hat, this debate over data and ads for new streaming services is very annoying because I use my desktop, my laptop for work and for work things, and then to enjoy streaming services in my downtime. I have my TV, and I love my TV, but it's a Roku TV, and I specifically bought it to use Roku as the underlying platform to watch content because I love the Roku UI, I love the Roku experience, and I feel like they have the most mature and just frankly most user-friendly platform that's out there. However, it is frustrating that I cannot get HBO Max. I cannot get Peacock. I was this week and I was like, hey, I should get Peacock. Tested that out before the show, see if they got anything, see how bad that intelligence TV show looks with David Schwimmer. But I quickly realized I couldn't because I have the Roku TV, and that's extremely frustrating. Just as a fan, not as because this podcast, not because I'm trying to analyze the market. It's just as a fan, it is so frustrating that you see this hype, you hear the hype, and yet you can't participate and check out content. So this war is kind of annoying. There's bigger things in life, obviously, but if I can just sit here and just be annoyed with this little part of the streaming war, it is very annoying as a consumer that I'm not able to get the content that I'm hyped up for, that I want to check out and see. And it's even more frustrating because yes, HBO Max has signed partner deals with companies like Hulu, but with the bundle that I got with Disney Plus, with Hulu, and with ESPN Plus, I cannot add any plugins. Like HBO Max would be a plugin into Hulu, so I can even jimmy rig my way through to watch HBO Max through Hulu because of the bundle deal. So all in all, this war of data and ads is very taxing. It's very annoying. I understand why. I think it's important that for each company to maintain their competitive advantage and to keep either the assets that they want to show on their own platform, their own channel, whatever, to increase their base, or they want to keep the ads and the metadata and all of that information themselves so that they can develop content, or they can choose which content's the best to license to then launch on their product. So I understand the business aspect, but just as a consumer, for a good 2 minutes just to vent, it's very frustrating, and it's gone on for a while. Thought that maybe some companies would cave. I thought after a month each side would come to the negotiating table, but that doesn't seem the case. So as far-fetched as it sounds, I hope there's a deal by Christmas, because if there's not, that's going to be really, really upsetting. That's going to hurt the business of all companies involved. A rising tide lifts all boats, and at the end of the day, more streaming players will affect and raise the bottom line of Roku no matter what. And then, being on Roku is going to affect the bottom lines for all these other streaming partners, even Apple TV Plus. So if Quibi could probably get on Roku, that probably help them out too. So it's at the situation where, as a consumer, my patience is wearing thin, and it's a little frustrating. So hopefully a resolution will come sometime soon. And hopefully, because there's good content I want to check on Peacock. There's good content I want to check on HBO Max. I'm just ready for that moment to be able to experience that. Sorry for the little bit of rant and this little bit of therapy. Just I had to work out that frustration a little bit.
It's understandable. I mean, the big thing is, the one thing I have to imagine though is if the deal does get reached with one of the two, it's only a matter of time before the other one caves as well. Because the thing is, Roku already has a huge market share advantage over Amazon. However, if Amazon was to make a deal, that could be the defining point, especially before the holiday season, where if some people are looking for streaming devices, they're going to look for devices that are specifically able to do the newer services like HBO Max and Peacock. The one other thing out there is that Google device that has been rumored but yet has not been announced by Google yet. And if that comes out before the holidays, Google already has deals in place with Peacock and HBO Max, so that could potentially change the tide by itself. And then suddenly the Google device, which hypothetically would be around the same price as the Amazon ones and the Roku sticks and that stuff, if it's the same price and people are looking for devices that can stream everything, that will be the option that everyone's going to flock to, is whatever people can actually watch all of the different services on. They're not going to have to choose a device that doesn't necessarily have all the services. And if that happens, honestly, let me put it this way. If Google announces that device in the coming months leading up to the holidays, and Roku and Amazon don't make some sort of deal with Peacock and HBO Max, I honestly believe that we could see Google gain a significant market share over what they currently have with the Chromecast, because it's nowhere near anywhere. It's not even, I think it's like single digits, if I remember correctly, compared to everybody else. I mean, the thing is, we're talking, that could be a huge advantage for Google if that ends up being the case. Back to Peacock here for a quick second. I told everybody on the last episode I was going to get Peacock and I was going to check it out, and I did in fact. However, I didn't dedicate an entire segment of the show to talk about Peacock's UI and their content and all of that, because I'm going to be completely honest. It exists. That's all I really can say. I mean, I have not had a chance to watch any of the original content that they have outside of my kids have watched a couple of the original content shows that they have. Where's Waldo? And I think they also checked out the Cleopatra in Space, which were two of the kids series that they had on the service. The Where's Waldo, it's great. It actually reminds me of shows you typically see on PBS, where they're educational, they're informative, but they're also like decent quality animation. It's not just like garbage animation like we see so often where it's very two-dimensional. It is obviously two-dimensional, but it's a little bit more detail. So there's that. As far as content goes, there are a couple of shows that I want to check out. There's specifically the show called The Capture, which I want to see. Brave New World, I will probably check out, but based on the trailers, I can't really tell what to expect, other than it is sci-fi and it's a little out there, and that's right up the vein of what USA has been doing the last couple of years with some of their content. However, some of that stuff is either hit or a complete miss, so I'm not real sure what to think about Brave New World up until the fact that I see it. So that's content-wise. As far as the UI goes, it's fine. I mean, like, it just looks like every other streaming service out there. It doesn't stand out in any way. The one thing I will say is that the free version channels that they have, where they have like continuous 24-hour channels that just play, I thought to myself, why would anybody use this? And I know that there are people who would use it. They just watch shows, they watch things on repeat or whatever. But I flipped through some of those channels to get an idea of what it was, and there was an episode. There's a Dateline channel, and literally they're just playing episodes of Dateline from over the years, specifically episodes that aren't necessarily about like current events, but like re-evaluating larger news stories and things like that. So the one that just happened to be on was O.J. Simpson's chase in the Ford Bronco. That one was the episode that just happened to be airing when I was flipping through. There's a channel where it's all kinds of clips related to The Office. It just reminds me of like someone watching playlists on YouTube of clips from The Office, popular clips. There was one for classic SNL skits, where it was like all these different skits related to old classic vintage SNL, and they just play continuously. And I would want to say, like, I think it was every 5 minutes, or maybe it was every 10 minutes, there were some ads that played, but most of the time they were under 2 minutes. And in some cases it felt like there was more blocks that were meant to be airing or meant to be playing, because they'd have these like weird transition spots that would, showcase the Peacock colors and say, please stay tuned, your programming will continue shortly. But they would play for like a weird extended 15 seconds that didn't make any sense. Like there should be an ad there, but there just wasn't. But like there's some other channels. There was one that was like Fail Team USA or I don't know. It was something to do with like just, mobile videos that you're filming that people screw up. And
that really sounds like an interesting take on like a YouTube channel. Like
I think it is YouTube in some way.
Yeah, it's actually kind of novel, to be honest. I mean, talking about like The Office and Parks and Rec and those shows, there's a lot of hidden, deleted scenes. There's actually other content that they filmed that wasn't released on TV or web series at the time. So The Office's YouTube channel is actually pretty interesting to keep up with. So that's a very interesting model that other players in the game haven't implemented. But if you're struggling for content, basically just, hey, what do people like on YouTube? And we'll just play that here. So,
I mean, it really was that. I mean, because the thing is, like,
not that bad of an idea, to be honest.
I was at a restaurant that had like a sports bar area, and some of the TVs that were airing, this was a while back. This wasn't recently, but I'm just using this as an example. I was watching the TV, and they were airing clips, and I'm not even joking. They were like, the Snapchat videos that you see where it's like people, doing something crazy. Like the same in the vein of like in the 90s, you had America's Funniest Videos. I know they rebooted the show and it was on for a while, where it was just basically like these quick videos of people, doing something amusing or doing something funny or trick shots or something unique or whatever. There was a channel that was playing nonstop at this sports bar of just these short clips. And it was like, I can see the appeal to have something like this because you don't have to give your full attention. You can look up, you can watch the 10-second video or whatever, and then you can stop paying attention if you want. You don't have to keep paying attention. It's the same thing with this, but honestly, I sat there watching it for maybe like 20 minutes with my son because I wasn't looking for anything really remotely interesting to watch, and I was kind of paying attention to my emails that I was getting through. So I figured, well, this can be on in the background. I can just glance up whenever I want. But it was something interesting that I didn't see on any of the other services that I thought to myself, this is probably not going to be something I'd ever use. But after checking out, it was kind of interesting. So that's Peacock in a nutshell. I don't really have a whole lot of else to say. I mean, obviously there's a lot of different movies on there. There's a lot of different TV shows. Some of the shows, one of the shows that I used to watch on Showtime, Ray Donovan, I never got to see the final season because I just didn't have the time. That show's actually been licensed from Viacom CBS for Peacock, so it's on there and the final season's on there. So instead of having to go figure out a way to get Showtime for a short amount of time just so I could watch the final season of that show, I can actually just watch the final season on Peacock. But the gist is, it's worth checking out. If you're a Comcast or Cox subscriber, you automatically get access to Peacock. It's not the ad-free version, but you will, in fact, get the premium version, which has the original content. So definitely check it out if you are a Cox or Comcast subscriber, because there's no reason not to, because it's free. Literally, you just go into the app, you type in your email that's associated with your account, and that's it. That's literally all you do. It's very easy to get in there.
Are there profiles?
There is not. There is not profiles.
Come on, streaming services.
And the thing is, it's weird, but I think it's because they just don't have enough content. Like, I scrolled through and checked. So, like, when you go into TV shows, which is one of their bullet points at the top, like the different categories, similar to the way Netflix, they have films, TV shows, kids, and I believe they have like a Latino section. And when I went into TV shows, there's a spot where you can view A to Z, all the shows that they have. And I went through and I looked and I was like, okay, I mean, like, it's a good amount of shows. Looking and based off of my preferences, I'm looking at it, I'm just like, man, I see maybe like 2 series on here that I'd actually want to see outside the original stuff that I mentioned earlier, that I had, that are older series that I hadn't seen in a long time that I would potentially go back. There were some surprises that I was like, oh, I didn't even think. I mean, like, there were shows that I watched back in the day that I didn't expect to be on there, but hey, they were on there. Same thing with the movies. There was a decent chunk of movies, but I mean, it's not like an enormous amount. I honestly believe that HBO Max has like probably 5 times more content as Peacock. And when you break down the price, you're getting way more value at HBO Max than you will with Peacock. You're also getting more content being produced, plus HBO originals, which you don't get obviously at Peacock. I think it's a little too early to say whether or not it'll be a success. I will say that they do need to get more content on there in general, because because, and obviously they're planning on getting more originals on there. There's more originals that will come to the service very soon once production picks up and things like that. But right now, it's just kind of like, it's there. It exists. And I can't say that's obviously a good thing, but the biggest problem is that they were really, really heavily relying on all the content they were going to get from the Olympics, which of course isn't happening, and that hurts them because there's just not a whole lot of content on there to check out that I think is going to draw a lot of people in.
So what you're saying is wait for The Office to come out in the new year.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Sounds good.
All right, so jumping over to niche streaming services, the Alex Rider series, which we previously mentioned was picked up by Prime Video, is actually going to land on IMDb TV here in the United States compared to everywhere else, which is seemingly it's ending up on Prime Video. Now, this is specifically worth mentioning because now we have original content that Amazon is producing for IMDb TV. And we know that IMDb TV is their ad-supported version. So if you were looking forward to watching Alex Rider, you don't even have an option of watching it ad-free because in order to watch it, you'll have to watch it on the free service of IMDb TV with ads. So again, it shows that they're definitely interested in growing IMDb TV regardless of, how popular Prime Video is. They need that service to succeed by itself, and the way they're going to do it is by putting some original content over there in addition to these high profile projects that we've heard about recently as well.
Overall, this article, I don't have an issue one way or the other. I have no real stake in the Alex Rider series. I have no real stake in IMDb TV, except that's where the show Fringe, which I love, I was trying to find it the other day, that's where it lives. But I mean, if I recall correctly, we talked about how Amazon paid a good chunk of money to get the rights to the show, and they're just going to put it on IMDb TV. So do you know, or can you at least speculate what Amazon's strategy for IMDb TV is and how it fits in with their Prime Video brand and overall their Prime, their literal, Amazon Prime business objective in general? Yeah,
so speculation is the only way I can approach this. But as far as my speculation goes, is that Prime Video obviously is a subscription service that you can separate from Prime subscriptions, the Amazon Prime subscription. However, most people who use Prime Video are Prime members. However, the thing is, as we've talked about before, Prime Video, their intent is not necessarily to grow as a standalone service. It's as a service that supports the Amazon Prime membership as a whole to get people to obviously be Amazon customers, buying Amazon products, using that service. That is what Prime Video is. And they've said this multiple times, even though sometimes it doesn't always feel like that. It sometimes feels like Prime Video is its own thing. They are doing their own stuff. They're trying to grow and become their own thing. But the reality of it is that's not how Amazon as a corporation views Prime Video. When it comes to IMDb TV, I think this is Amazon's way of getting around the idea of how can we show that having content can be profitable to people higher up within Amazon. I think honestly that's my only thought is how can we show that content can be profitable in an ad-supported version, that we can have content on here, that we can grow our video platform larger than and be able to compete with the likes of Netflix. I mean, in some ways they're already competing with the likes of Netflix and Hulu and the newer players. But the thing is, Amazon as a corporation does not look at it and say, yes, Prime Video, you're doing amazing. Just keep spending an insane amount of money to create content. They're still obviously spending money on content, but the thing is, I don't think that's how Amazon views it. Amazon, the corporation. I think that Prime Video is trying to figure out a way to become larger in the views of their own parent company. IMDb TV is a way to show, look, if we have an ad-supported version, we can obviously get people to watch this. We can make money off of the ads. And I think long-term, this becomes part of the tier of the new Prime Video service that will possibly incorporate some of these live TV options we've talked about. I honestly think if you put the pieces together, it seems like they are potentially creating something like Peacock, where Peacock has the top tier original content ad-free, which is the Prime Video. You've got the middle tier, which is ad-supported with original content, which is clearly with what they're doing with IMDb TV. And then you've got a live TV option, which you can add on, which isn't necessarily Peacock, obviously, but is something like Hulu, where you can add that onto it. Hulu has multiple options. It's literally the same thing that I'm describing here, with ad-free options, live TV options, premium options with original content that is ad-supported. It clearly comes across that is what they're gearing towards, is trying to create some sort of model that can rival something like Hulu. When you look at Hulu is the only service out there that has live TV, has original content, has ad-supported original content, and has multiple different tiers. I think that is what is happening or being planned to happen at Amazon, is that Amazon's looking to create something like this. IMDb TV just literally fits into it as, look, this is an example of what we can do. I don't know why they ever, let's be honest, IMDb as a website has nothing to do with original content or anything like that. It doesn't even, when they originally came up with IMDb TV, it didn't make any sense to me as to why they were even creating a service to begin with. Unless, of course, it was just like a trial to show, hey, this isn't necessarily associated with the Amazon brand. Some people aren't even going to know that this is associated with the Amazon brand. So we can run it as a trial, see how successful it turns out, see if we get some content that's maybe mid-tier, not super high profile. We get some mid-tier content over here. People will start checking it out. We can build this. We can start making some money on the ads. We can show that this is a successful model to roll into a larger Prime Video option that they actually have. That is my only take. And I don't, if they don't end up doing something like that, I don't see the longevity of IMDb TV making sense. I don't understand why they would do IMDb TV separate from Prime Video and not just have the option of having the content on Prime Video. It just, to me, it doesn't make any sense unless there is another reason, which would be they're trying to create something larger.
Gotcha. That makes total sense. Like, independently, I'm happy about IMDb TV. I think that they're doing some interesting things there. It looks promising. For one of the big ad-supported free platforms that's out there, it's the one that's gaining the most traction because Amazon is behind it, pushing it forward. However, when you look at IMDb TV and Amazon, and that partnership is how does that work, and what is the mesh point? What is the business objective for Amazon? Its goals for IMDb TV? Is it a testing ground? Is it to be a rival, a competitor to, you go a whole bunch of different ways. So I just personally thought it was good just to dive in a little bit and just to try to figure out, okay, what is your opinion on IMDb TV and its relationship with Prime and Prime Video? Because, they paid a good chunk of money for Alex Rider, and that was a heavily fought for series, and just handing that off to IMDb TV, to me, is a little bit... that just raises questions, and then that begets some type of answer, in my opinion. And I think it's more important to not just pass off this one. It's just like, okay, well, they just passed stuff to here and we move forward. I felt it deserved a question because it just to me, it seems Prime Video and Amazon has a strategy for IMDb TV, but the public doesn't know what it is. I just figured your opinion on that would be good.
All right, so that is actually all of the news that we have from the past week. We are approaching our normal time that we try to stick to. I don't want to breeze over necessarily the Netflix Q2 results, but I will say we'll talk a little bit more in depth about this next week. But to give you the big gist, Netflix added another 10 million subscribers in quarter two. That, of course, beats the expectations. However, the downfall is that the forecast for the third quarter is that they will actually go down. That, of course, is if the pandemic does not continue to rise. At least here in the States, there's lots of areas that are going back into quarantine and closing things down and things like that, just because of the stuff that is currently happening with the coronavirus spiking in certain areas of the country. And as the season gets away from summer and we start getting colder, it's going to obviously go up in cases too. So when all of that's happening, that could obviously have a positive impact for Netflix. But as of right now, they're forecasting that the amount of subscribers that they had, which, let's be clear, back in quarter one when they announced how many subscribers, they thought at that point that they had really plateaued, and they were thinking that they weren't going to be going any higher, and they still ended up adding another 10 million subscribers in quarter two. So the real question, of course, is what will happen in quarter three. But for right now, I think it's all going to be depending on current events and what's happening within the world with the virus and quarantine and things like that before anybody really speculates. But I think analysts in general were disappointed by the fact that the third quarter was going to not have a huge growth rate. But I think that analysts, let's be honest, Netflix has had some really, really great quarters, and it's because of what's happening in the world. And to sit there and say, oh, well, the third quarter is going to not be so great or it's going to go down, it should be as expected. I mean, let's be honest.
I mean, there has been other global pandemics before in history. I mean, the first case that disproves that theory is, the Spanish flu, just the reach that the Spanish flu had on just the world in general. It just was massive. So there have been other global pandemics, but there hasn't been one this recently at all. And there hasn't been one with the modern economy as it is now, tech-based. It's really more about information and data versus, making goods. So, and you have to be in a factory close-knit with people. Like, you still have those parts of the economy, but for the parts of Netflix, it's there's nothing quite like it. And frankly, it's hard to give an estimate because there's just so many unknowns, and there's not even like known unknowns where that something is unknown. There's just so many things that we have no clue. A large amount of Netflix's subscribers and growth, subscribers, are in the United States, and the United States has just been in a little bit of a mess. Some states are reopening, some states are not reopening, some states reopened and it's now biting them in the butt again. But for the most part, it's hard to predict what's going to happen in America in the next quarter. However, it's also hard to compare what's going to happen across the world. It seems that Europe is having a better handle on the virus than America, and they're starting to reopen up. Each nation's doing it a little bit differently, but it seems that they've gotten a control over in Europe. China's reopening, Japan's reopening, New Zealand, Australia, like other places around the world are reopening at the same time as maybe America is falling back a little bit in just everything going on. So it could be that the negative growth in America, people are losing their jobs, going on unemployment, other things. People are going to drop their Netflix subscriptions. Maybe that negative growth is going to be offset by the global growth because the rest of the world's going to be reopening while the United States is not reopening. Like that is a true possibility of what could happen for quarter three. It could be that maybe 1 month we have a bad month in the United States, but we somehow find a way to stop the spread of the virus. Things start to reopen, businesses get going again, people have incomes, disposable income to then spend on streaming service, Netflix. I mean, like there's a whole bunch of different things, and it's just hard to compare what their growth should be. It's also hard to compare what their growth is from previous years because there has been market volatility before. There has been trends that do repeat themselves, but you can't really compare what's going on right now with anything that's happened in the past. So it's hard to give those forecasts. It's even hard to compare what's currently happening with the financial crisis of 2008 because one was a banking crisis where people were losing their jobs, but you wanted them to work. But now it's we don't want people to work due to public health reasons. So it's hard to compare apples to oranges. It's hard to give forecasts. So I feel that, and it's not really a critique on you, it's a critique on just people putting a little bit too much faith and weight into forecasts. It's right now, I feel like forecasts are going to be a little bit pointless, meaningless, because there's just so many unknowns that's going to happen that I wouldn't read too much into what the forecasts have to say. There's other parts of the article that I feel like are way more intriguing than just the 10 million subscribers that they added. They talk a lot about free cash flow. They talk about there's a lot more numbers that we're going to unpack next week, but that we talk about for the longest time of Netflix is growing. They're spending a lot of money. How are they, making a profit at the end of the day? We hear in the news how they're taking out bigger loans to pay for their original content. And there are a lot of good numbers, in my opinion, of their Q2 numbers. It deserves more time than just me ending the show like this. But overall, I was happy with Netflix's numbers. I'm curious how their Q3 is going to be, especially as they launch more projects, internationally, and how the international market is probably going to offset the US market in terms of growth. in productivity. So that's kind of my take on it. I'm happy with the numbers, and be wary of forecasts because they're going to be kind of meaningless for the next. I feel like the next 2 to 3 quarters are just going to be just a wash of we have no clue what's going to happen because things are so crazy and things are so unprecedented that it's hard to even give a prediction.
Agreed. And we'll talk more about Q2 results on the next episode. We'll dive a little bit more into them. The last thing I want to leave everybody with is there is an amazing thread by the entertainment strategy guy. He dived into the content on Netflix, specifically dealing with the films. It's a humongous thread. We've got a link in the show article to the Thread Reader app that actually puts it all together so you can read it all collectively as one. I'm not sure if he's going to hint at this thread in his weekly article, but if he does, we'll potentially bring this back up. But it was a great article that basically dives deep into the amount of content that, or the top movies that Netflix is producing, the number of people who are actually consuming them as far as 70% consumption rate of the actual films, trying to get a better idea of how many people are actually watching these films, and then putting that in comparison to just taking a step further. If this was a box office and this many people watched it, how successful would these projects be? Obviously, it's not, that's a skewed number by itself, but definitely take a look at that. Entertainment Strategy Guy, follow him on Twitter. He's got some amazing stuff that he's posting all the time, in addition to his content that he's posting on his website every single week. He's also posting some awesome tweets, so definitely check him out. Outside of that, there is a list of trailers that you guys can check out from the past week. In addition to that, you can get in touch with us at thestreamingwars@gmail.com with any questions, comments, concerns, feedback, or topics of discussion you'd like us to talk about in the next or future episodes. You can follow us on Twitter or join our Discord for all the latest articles that we talk about here on the podcast and some that we don't. You can follow us on Instagram for all the latest announcements related to new episodes of the podcast releasing. Or like I've said in the past, please leave us reviews wherever you're listening to this podcast. That is always greatly appreciated. And with all that being said, for Tony and myself, this has been The Streaming Wars, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to The Streaming Wars. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram. Also consider supporting us on Patreon. Links can be found at thestreamingwars.io.